welcome to another episode of Parallel Barking, where my dad
Woof woof.
and myself, Bark Bark, will take you through another
Drag you through, more
breathtaking-
like it. Drag you through.
another breathtaking event or topic that we deem worthy. Today is
Right. And dear listeners, if you got a topic you want us to talk about, please send in your requests.
yeah, please, because honestly, sometimes we just sit here and before we record, we scroll through our phones and are like, what should we talk about? What is
right.
it?
And we
What
want
do
to
we think?
please you. We want to please our listeners.
It's because
by
we are
talking-
people pleasers.
Well, yeah, we want to talk dribble about things that are of more concern to you than us.
Right. Yeah.
There you go.
And
All right.
today that led us to what is known as the Florida Don't Say Gay bill.
And Tennessee, we can't forget the good folks of Tennessee, although
the
we
good
could do
folks.
others as well.
But I don't think the one in Tennessee is passed yet. I'm not sure. Has it?
Doesn't matter. That's one of the
yes,
things I
yes.
want to talk about.
That's true, because you're right. That is a very good point, because the publicity is out there.
Yo ho, that's right.
So, and the signals were sent. So does it really matter if?
Well, I mean, it does matter, but it to some extent, what matters is being able to. It's the 15 minutes of fame, the signaling, the displays, the significance of loyalty and of division, and what it tells us about social solidarity in the first third of the 21st century, of which there appears to be less and less. But we'll get there. We should talk about the bills though.
Okay. So to be clear, Florida's law is aimed at primary students, and it doesn't specifically say don't say gay. The heart of it is saying classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards.
Right, so it's most benign,
Right.
right? If we talked about this in terms of sex education as opposed to having to do specifically with sexual orientation and gender identity, the bill would say, well, you can't talk about sex education before third grade, which may be a stupid choice, but not necessarily one that is profoundly bizarre.
Right.
And then in fourth grade, I guess what it means is that you can't really talk about the multiple techniques of condom use in a sex education
Or
class in
lube.
fourth grade, right? In fourth grade, but maybe you should save that to 12th grade.
Or
I
fifth,
guess.
maybe.
Right. So that's, in a sense, and at least on paper, it's benign. So, right. So the Florida one is mostly a parental power thing, where, and you and I talked about this a little before we started, that it cuts both ways, but at least on its face, you can make a plausible argument that, one of the things that we have worried about, and in the old days, meaning about 30 years ago, we used to worry about this as a race, ethnicity, and class issue, which was the way in which the state and state organs would increasingly use their power to demand that especially marginalized groups or traditionally marginalized and subordinated groups would parent by creating all of these rules that allow social services and the like to intervene in the way in which they brought up their kids. And there was a lot of backlash to that, saying, well, why is the state interfering that parents ought to be able to control? And everyone likes that, as long as what you're talking about are things that that we want parents to control. And here is the other side, because on the one hand, you do want kids and parents to bond and all of this, and not just in the area of gender identity and LGBTQ issues, but with respect to everything. On the other hand, we also know, because there's an equally long history of parental abuse, right? But there again, it gets really tricky. Parental abuse meaning what? Because parental abuse is contextual, with in reference to what or how. And so you've got this
that's
this
hard
thing that that you if you try in good faith to get it right, you can argue and then you can try to get it right. And that's really, in a sense, part of the problem. So on its face, you got this parental rights thing, which at least speaks to something that at least has a plausible basis, not in this context, but generally. And then basically a curricular decision that third grade kids and younger, maybe they should just wait. Now, the interesting thing is, and then afterwards, you can have instruction. The interesting thing here, of course, is that it says nothing about the kids interacting with each other with respect to gender identity.
Yes, this was when we were talking before, what I thought was a brilliant point that you made, and I think it's great.
The kids can talk about it, but in this way, it mimics, in a sense, the split that we have, very common and well-accepted split in the religion area, where teachers can't talk about their personal relationship with Jesus, but kids can write a paper talking about their personal relation to Jesus, as long as it has something to do with whatever it is that they were talking. And in a sense, if you look at it from that perspective, there's no reason a kid can't go and talk about, the way in which his own family is oriented, or the way in which he sees families around himself oriented, or the way he likes the idea. I mean, it's coming from the kid. Well, there it is. There's nothing in the law that says you can't do it. And there's nothing in the law that says a teacher has to stop them or can prevent students from doing things, artwork or whatever, that shows, dad, and kid, in a picture thing, going to the state fair or whatever.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of that. But Florida's bill has been potent, not because of what it says, because my guess is maybe 7 people on earth have actually read it, but for what it signals. And that becomes the more interesting and really the much darker part of the Florida story. But before we get there, tell me about the Tennessee one.
The Tennessee one is quite different. The Florida one stops at 3rd grade, and the proponents have argued that they are just trying to keep teaching about gender identity and sexual orientation out of the youngest classrooms, of course. But the Tennessee bill covers the whole K through 12.
Yeah, but they do it in a naughty way, right?
Oh, absolutely. And they are explicit about it. They explicitly restrict the normalization of and support or address the addressal if you address the quote controversial social issues such as lesbian, gay, bisexual, and I'm quoting.
No, I gotta stop there for a second, because I really fell off my chair when I read that. So let me read it.
Since when have these?
No, and you and I were talking about this, and we're going, the Supreme Court has protected, gay marriage plus against the criminalization of acts of sexual nature among people, whatever their sex or gender identification is. And you read this and you wonder, did they not get the memo?
I don't think,
which is now like almost a decade old. So yeah, here it is: textbooks and instructional materials, supplemental instructional materials that promote, normalize, support, or address controversial social issues such as lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender lifestyles.
Yes.
And I
Are,
go, seriously? This is the language of the
inappropriate.
90s,
Okay. Okay.
right?
They were inappropriate. Okay.
Oh my God. So I'm looking at this, I'm going, right. I mean, it was like this.
No, no, no,
bill
no,
time
no, no,
traveled
no.
back.
This one's even better. Whereas the promotion of LGBT issues and lifestyles in public schools offends a significant portion of students, parents, and Tennessee residents
No, but
with
you know what?
Christian values.
You know what? Payback is hard. And here it's the right, in this case, what purports to be the Tennessee legislature, now falling into the same trap as the left, which is in a republic like ours that is built on solidarity, to indulge in a politics of offense is, in a sense, ultimately both ludicrous and infantile.
Exactly.
When the left
What
does
are
it,
you
it's
doing?
caused all manner. It's caused all manner of unintended consequences. But that doesn't mean that the right is going to make things better by then indulging in their version of this politics of offense.
So offended.
Right. But that is funny. So Tennessee is basically now censoring textbooks,
Yes.
and therefore instruction.
Do you think we'll see book burnings?
No, I think that no. That's so 20th century. No one burns books. Most of this stuff is online anyway.
That's
So
what
you're
I was
gonna have to
waiting
burn
for.
computer. No, and you and I were talking about this before. No, this is monkeys. This is the monkey trials. At least you have to give Tennessee their due. That there's some people who learn not to hit their heads against the wall after they hit their head against the wall, but apparently that has never taken in Tennessee.
Wait, can you explain the monkey trial though?
Yeah. So in the 20s, right, it was illegal to teach evolution, including in this case getting textbooks. Clarence Darrow. There was a very famous trial about teaching evolution in Tennessee. Tennessee was not the only one, but it was the most famous one. So a lot of these states, and Tennessee in particular, has a long history of, in the name of curricular choice, that is exercised in the discretion of the legislature, which is itself a hoot, that they can either turn the knob on or turn the knob off on learning and knowledge. And in this case, in the old days, it was evolution. Apparently, they've gotten over that somewhat grudgingly, although not really, because that went on almost to the beginning of this century, and I think people just got exhausted. But now it's the LGBT issues, and I believe that this is fueled by all of the kind of sadly bizarre coverage of issues about kids struggling with gender identity and the sort of Neolithic response to these kids and others struggling with and trying to live their lives as in a way that is fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
So you get this. So we got Tennessee and Florida, and both of them kind of strange. I suspect that the Tennessee one is going to be a little harder, even when you look at it from a legal perspective. It's probably going to be a little harder to survive than the Florida one. The Florida one much more likely to survive, given the way it was written, although probably there'll be a bit of edge trimming on the edges, and there'll be a lot of politics around them.
But I think you're right. You're right about what you were saying. I think these bills are pretty exploitative over the narratives that have been
It's
going
politics.
around. You're right.
It's politics, but it's the signaling that's actually the more troubling. And you really see that,
and that's it's hard. It's hard to take.
Right. Because when we started talking about this, right, like everyone else, right, the last thing you're actually going to look at is the bill, right? And so what everyone talks about, including our journalist friends who then convey information to people, it's not the bill, it's the summary of the bill and its implications.
Mhm.
And essentially what you aren't talking about is the bill itself, but what you're talking about is the meaning of this in politics. And so it becomes much more useful and also dangerous because in a lot of ways, I think the most important part of these bills are in their signaling effect, both signaling the political direction of particular states and
Yeah.
also signaling a kind of a position where it's okay to marginalize and to treat less well some people
A
over
certain
others.
group, right?
And the weirdness of it is, of course, that if you look at the black letter, it's not good, well, putting aside the Tennessee one, which it is, right? That one is much more closer to this kind of hysteria creating thing. But the Florida one was, I think, slightly more carefully written. It's not really the bill itself that's going to be the thing that we're going to be talking about. It's the overtones, the signaling, and the sort of permission that the legislature appears to be giving to factions within
To
the
the public.
population,
Mhm.
right, about what it is that they can't or can't do to people that they correctly or erroneously identify as a group of people who are not only vulnerable, right, and traditionally marginalized, but now with respect to whom there may be, we're back to open season in the kinds of ways that aren't rarefied and polite, but much more brutal.
If only the opponents of the bill knew how much they were sabotaging themselves by calling it
Well,
that.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, remember that I think, and I've written about this in other contexts, you're dealing with just a large group of what I call bubble people. These are people who are either living within their own bubble and they're absolutely incapable of understanding anything outside of their bubble, or even worse, they're people who fully understand this, but in fact don't care, or in fact embrace it, right? And so you've got at least three different variations. There's probably this huge spectrum. And then the question is, what or how do you deal with them? I mean, one way is where you have to fight fire with fire, and then you become like them, but on the other side. But that's wholly unsatisfying if your object is to create a kind of national solidarity at some level, because what was it? Sorry, I'm channeling Rodney King. At some point, we all got to get along.
It's true
You
though.
know, I may not like you or it, but we all got to get along and we all got to be respectful of each other at some level,
Mhm.
right? Even if I don't agree with what you're doing, as long as none of this is taking me down with whatever it is you're doing, and you're as respectful to me as I am to you, then, you know, at some level and somehow, which we apparently are incapable of figuring out, that should be it. But that's right. So you don't really necessarily want to go down into the gutter with
No,
these folks.
but
At the same-
it is incredibly sad that the 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 state has given permission to the public to, you know, treat a group of people a different way. And
gender baiting, like Jew baiting a century ago, it's easy, right? It's the old dog whistles and whatever. It's distracting to some extent. People who are paying $4 or $5 a gallon for gas, people who find that their jobs and employee protections are being eviscerated, and even high level people. I was amused, for example, to read today about the the ad for a position. I think it was a lecturer position at UCLA, where they wanted 5 letters of references and a PhD. The compensation for which is 0. Right.
stop.
That's another podcast. But you know, this kind of you know, LBGTQ, et cetera, baiting, just like the religious baiting and the like, is a way of distracting people. And it's an easy way to garner some kind of support.
Political support.
Right.
Mhm.
But in the worst possible way, because what you're doing is you're eroding solidarity. And in a society that is built on these differences, well, that may fly, but in a society like ours, a decision we made certainly at the end of the Civil War, which took us a century to begin to keep, right? One that is built on the promise of national solidarity. That kind of stuff, it actually works against the principles on which our republic now is based and its strength, as opposed to otherwise. So then you have to ask yourself, well, why are they doing this? And one of the answers is, I guess, well, it's a cheap way to get coverage, and they got plenty of coverage. Two, you really now energized your base. Well, great, so it's factional politics, but factional politics can bite, especially if you wind up being the minority faction. But people think short term. But beyond that, and
I
of
mean, I
course,
think the
here,
previous administration paved the way pretty easily.
that's everyone always blames the previous administration. as if
No,
it was some kind
no,
of
no,
magical creature.
stop. You know that the climate that was left after Trump left office, that was the first time the Capitol was stormed, and don't even.
No, look, you and I are going to have to agree to disagree on this. The question is whether you can throw all of these things that had been boiling up over the last 40 or 50 years into the administration.
It's not his fault. No.
No, I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm not, and I'm not suggesting that he's completely irrelevant, but I am suggesting that investing him with this kind of magical superpower is I think, also distracting, because it tends to take away the blame and the fault that we all share for the goings on, certainly since 2008, in every possible direction. And so, but I've always been, as you know, I've always been on this kick about being
I
very
didn't vote
suspicious.
for him.
No, but I'm talking about, I'm being very
I
suspicious.
know you say, I know. Like it's a bunch of different things that led to this.
It's not the man. It's not the man. He is not the demon. He's many things, but he's not the demon prince of evil who masterminded this thing.
Well, of
And
course
to
not,
invest him with
but
that
he
kind of
also
power
didn't
should give
help.
him- well, right. Yeah, it didn't help. And it didn't help, but why didn't it help? Because there was a bunch of folks.
There was definitely no solidarity that was won
I
under.
couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. But don't dump it all on this
Poor
gentleman.
man. This poor.
Well, not poor man.
individual.
It's like dumping all good. You can't dump all good on Roosevelt. You thought I was going to say Obama. You can't.
No,
say
I thought you were
that.
going to say Reagan, honestly, and then I would have to smack you.
On Ronnie, no.
Everybody who's listening, I am not a Reagan fan, and I don't care.
Were you even born then? Yeah, I guess you were.
Uh,
That was the first time you voted, and often when you were like 5 months old.
I was very angry.
Yeah, you came out of the womb angry.
Very angry. What is this terrible human doing?
All right,
running
what is to be done? Are you going to go out on the street and burn down the, I don't know what you can burn down. There's not much burning to do. It's all inside there.
It's a really good question.
What do you propose?
Did have a thought maybe 5 minutes ago, and then it ran out of my head because
That's the
I
problem with thinking now, right? It's got a very short half-life.
really does. Well,
I mean, I suppose one can mock it to death, but it's going to be the law. The usual is, but this is coming from me as a lawyer. The best form of resistance is what the police used to call, I forget what they called it, but it was working strictly to the rule, that if it wasn't in the rule, you weren't going to do it. and that wound up making everyone crazy because of course the rules are never sufficient. So what I might tend to do is to, but in Tennessee, you're going to litigate it. But in Florida, I'd probably litigate and then absolutely strictly abide by the rule requiring
Yes.
people to have to take this to some administrative agency every time that there's a problem. But that's the beauty of language, right? Because one can read this in all kinds of ways, and probably one of the best guerrilla tactics. And not just when craziness comes out of the right, but when craziness comes out of the left as well, is to actually take people at their word, the micro word, and then invest it. There's no reason they're not God. There's no reason you have to invest it with their meaning. You invest it with your own. And then watch what happens as all of this winds up going into dispute resolution mechanisms, which then slows everything down and certainly confuses everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm wondering how they would enforce this,
Oh,
what that would look like.
in the
Would it be like a
usual tragic,
tattletale situation?
yeah, it's the usual tragic ways, right? So in Florida, probably they'd find some poor, well-meaning faculty member and then ruin their lives, or they'd find some parent or something, and I don't know. There'd be you'd be in the business of martyr, saint and martyr making, and that's really the tragedy of this. Everyone loves to do this, and you're thinking in these grand terms, but you're really messing with people's lives.
Yes.
And
Because the state thinks it's their business, apparently, at least
Well,
Tennessee and Florida.
yeah, but they think in the abstract. This is always the problem with these statutes. They're all written for the greater glory of abstractions. But
moral.
abstractions tend to, people bleed, abstractions don't. And there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be, there will be a lot of tragedies here caused by this. And of course, the people who are responsible for it, assuming that they remain in office, will remain more or less insulated from its consequences. They don't bear it. They don't have to deal with it. They don't run the administrative agencies. They don't sit in the courts. They don't have to sit and deal with dispute resolution. They're not the kids. They're not the parents. They're not the local communities that may be torn apart. They're sitting in their gilded, in this case, the states, not very well gilded. They're abstract little, again, bubbles.
They're bubbles, yeah. They don't have to worry about the consequences.
And they're completely insulated. But that goes back to, I mean, you see this everywhere.
That's all, yeah, that's history. That's how it works.
COVID mask rules for everyone but me. Right. These rules apply except for me. Yeah, the old and
because I live in a bubble, don't you know?
And it's a bubble that I can create under law, which is even better.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we've kind of run out of time. You got any more thoughts on this?
No, my lips are dry because we have talked this through.
We've talked this through, and of course we share. And of course there'll be a lot of people who disagree with what they're saying, with what we're saying, but they have their own podcast. But
yeah, you can do your own podcast. I think these bills are stupid. So give us your own opinion if you have one.
Right, but they are powerful. To use my, sorry, I got to do this for like 2 seconds. They're powerful discursive vehicles that, like you said, and I absolutely agree with you, appear to give people permission to do things that the state neither has the authority nor really the courage to, because they don't want to bear the responsibility.
No, they don't. They want to use minions
doing things right and
do their bidding to create the culture that they want to see.
Right, and at the end of the day, is that really what you want?
Do you want a state to have that control over you? Think about it. Think about it, people.
But even worse, do you want the state to give you permission to I guess with impunity, just gratuitously be cruel in social, economic, cultural ways to people who you may or may not know, and I don't know, to what ends, and it makes you feel better, in which case you really got to go back to church
Yeah, you got to
and
think about
think
something. Look
about
inside
your own
yourself.
moral corruption.
Yeah.
But all right,
All right, all right, all right. We're done. Thank you, everyone. We
woof
will
woof,
bark at you next time.
woof woof.